Hello, welcome everyone to Apprate's OSS Fund. Here with us today, we have Oliver Walters joining myself to talk a little bit more about OSS and InvenTree. Oliver, would you mind just kind of giving yourself a little brief intro and telling me a little more about how you got started doing what you do in software development?
Sure. My background, I'm an embedded electronics engineer. So a lot of software and electronics experience. And inventory kind of started when at the company I work at, we needed some pretty specific software to do some particular or peculiar inventory tracking. And had a look at a long sort of look around at the commercial products available and open source products available, and then asked around about what sort of was available, and then sort of thought the infamous thought, well, how hard can it be to make something myself?
Right.
When I found that, but nothing really met the specific requirements of what we were looking for, and so it started as a very small target project, just doing sort of one kind of little thing. And it was, just sort of something that I was developing myself, really, in my own time, just as a bit of a learning project. So I had no initial experience with any sort of web development or database development or anything like that. So I kind of just was starting to have a play around with the different frameworks available. Found Django, which is a Python web framework, started playing around with that, and kind of came up with a proof of concept of what I wanted to do. And so as it went on, the scope kind of started expanding out. What if it could do this? What if it could do that? As these things go. And after a little while, I realised this might actually be a useful product for other people, sort of in general.
So was your original thought to you were writing it for work for a specific need, or this was completely like something you were just thinking about?
It's kind of, I guess it kind of happened organically.
Okay.
We had a need at work, and I was kind of just as a project playing around in my spare time to see if I could come up with something, essentially. And then I guess from having a look around, felt like I did quite a lot of research on the available sort of inventory management systems in the open source arena, and there were a few options that seemed pretty targeted and not sort of useful in general, like in the general case, especially in the way that we wanted to use it. So I thought, hey, I've written this thing. It'd be cool if other people found it useful as well, and then sort of threw it up on GitHub. And that was back in 2017. I kind of just sat there for probably a couple of years, really. I had kids, kind of forgot about it a little bit. We were using it at work, but in a very targeted, specific way. Then I guess over the last few years, it started to get a little bit of attention. I can't actually, exactly remember how it all started snowballing, but eventually a couple of other people started throwing in suggestions for ideas and bug fixes, new features, all that sort of stuff, and completely surprised me that anyone else even knew it was there, let alone were actually using it, which was really cool. And then there's been a couple of, I guess, like watershed moments where the project got shared on like Hackaday, I think, which really bumped up the visibility, and we started to get lots of people coming and starring the project and commenting and adding issues, and that was really cool to see that people started using it. But with all the people using it, we needed to make it usable. So people who weren't core developers could install it or debug it when things went wrong or add new features. We had to think about usability, all sorts of things. Like it's been a massive learning experience in terms of stuff that I didn't even know that you needed to know, and then stuff that basically as the product grew, the requirements grew, and we needed to refactor the product lots of times, and yeah, there's just been a lot of stuff.
Sure.
And then where it's at now, we've got there's probably 3 or 4 core developers, including myself, who are regular contributors and have input into the direction of the software. We maybe about a dozen or so people who are contributing every now and then. It's been really interesting to see the ratio of users to contributors, which is pretty low. The ratio of contributors to users is very low, but there's certainly a lot of people who are using it in a professional environment or a hobby environment or whatever, which is really cool. But now that there's a lot more uptake in professional environments, enterprise sort of setups, and so definitely there's scope for us to offer enterprise features, offer bounties for new features that people want, priority bug fixes, that sort of thing. So it kind of feels like the project's at that level now.
Nice.
But it's been a long time getting here.
So as far as InvenTree and what it does, I kind of grew up in the SAP world. So I'm used to like event management, materials management, and sales side of things. And I noticed like all the parts and pieces that you're covering here, that was something that I went through on the SAP side of things. How deep would you say, or like how comparatively feature wise to like a full blown product like that is InvenTree? And can you explain more of like all of those features that something like InvenTree can do?
Yeah. So I guess feature-wise, compared to something more like a full-blown SAP, it's getting closer to that. Its beginnings were a lot more targeted, and it's certainly, I guess, maybe scope creep has blown it out a little bit, but also it's just becoming generally more useful. So InvenTree started essentially as a way of managing just bills of material. So I work at an electronics company. We make electronic widgets, and we're managing our bills of material in a very haphazard way. And so the beginnings of InvenTree was just a way for us to manage our bills of material and keep track of we have this capacitor. What products do we use that in? And that, for a while, was kind of the scope of InvenTree.
And that was probably like a step up out of like an Excel sheet or something you guys were running before?
Yeah, pretty much. There was, Excel spreadsheets or, no Excel spreadsheets in some cases. And yeah, so we needed something that was centralized and obviously more like a database than, flat, unlinked spreadsheets. And so it then sort of grew to become, well, how much of these parts do we have and where are they? So the inventory management side of things kind of crept in a little bit in there. And so then we had, stock tracking essentially of the various parts. Then we needed a way to bring them into the building and take them out of the building. So when we purchase them, we need to add them in. When we load them on board, we need a way to subtract them from stock. And so sort of, I guess, organically, we had started adding features like purchase orders or build orders. And it kind of, started to look like, I guess, a lot of, similar products, but very targeted towards the engineers. So this is way more of a low level. The engineers or the technicians can very quickly jump in and, adjust and update the data, rather than, I guess, a lot of the other systems that we looked at beforehand are very data entry heavy. Like you've got to do a lot of, if you want to make a purchase order, then you have to go through so many steps. Whereas with InvenTree, we're trying to be as streamlined as possible and trying to be like efficient more in a production environment.
I'm always curious, since this is an open source project, it sounds like you started working on it for work. I imagine they allocated some time for you at work to be working on this. What's their feelings as far as like you working on an open source project and kind of their software being open source? How's that viewed?
Yeah, it's so primarily the work that has been done on this has been sort of in my time. Like it started off as a project that I was experimenting with just to see, kind of I wanted to learn, how to write database code and how to write web code and that sort of thing. Then once it became actually useful and like I started, just rolling it out a little bit at work, just to see, how it would go. And it has really caught on, and it's been really good. I guess I've written some features that have benefited, specifically us, and that sort of code that I've written, I guess, for work. But now the majority of the time that I spend on it is for everyone else. Like the user base is pretty huge now, and the majority of the time spent on it is answering people's queries, responding to bug notifications, implementing new features for people, that sort of thing. Like it's kind of just running at work now and pretty stable in terms of what we want out of it. So yeah, it's kind of interesting because it has organically grown from, I guess, a pet project to something that was we were using at work to now it's just everywhere.
Yeah, I love it. That's fantastic. The GitHub side of things, maintaining a project of this size can be kind of daunting. How have you found like doing maintenance on that? How is that going? And like, how do you handle like PRs, issues, discussions?
Yeah, it's been really interesting how much of the effort now, or the effort, I guess, in total for the project has been maintaining the project and not actually writing code. So I guess there was a real uptick in usage probably about 18 months ago where it started to become really popular. And so suddenly we've got, hundreds of issues and people commenting all the time. Wake up in the morning with 24 emails about the project. Like, what do we have to deal with today? So I think it was about that time that GitHub started rolling out their GitHub Actions. Previously, we'd been doing like unit testing and CI with, I think, Travis maybe.
Yep.
And migrated everything over to GitHub Actions, which allowed us to do a lot of really cool things. Like obviously, we can automatically build and push a Docker image whenever different versions, like different branches, like we've got main branch, stable branch, different versions of the code get pushed up. We have a bunch of unit tests that run on every pull request, and that's things like maintaining style conventions for the code, actually running functional tests across the database and the API. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes on to make our lives easier, I guess, as maintainers and developers on the project. So
how do you balance like true bug issues versus feature requests that people are putting in? Is it kind of one of these things where you're focusing on the product so much and bugs and handling that side that you're welcome to features coming in if someone else does the work?
It's interesting. We're finally kind of getting to the point where we've got new developers coming in and offering to submit actual new features or new requests. A big part of that was building up a contribution guide. So in like we've got a contributing.md or a file basically there that says, okay, here is the technology stack that we use. Here's how you sort of dive into the code, a rough sort of breakdown of where the different parts of the code are stored. It's a pretty big code base now, so like it does require a little bit of getting into, but we've got a lot of, I guess, documentation around that to help new people get on board. And we're very happy to hold people's hand through the first couple of PRs, because if they get hooked and start contributing really cool stuff, then that benefits everyone. In terms of the balance, It feels like at the moment it's pretty good. Like the number of bugs has been, pretty low recently, which is really good. I think because we've put the effort in to make sure that we've got lots of testing, that every new feature also requires unit tests to be added for it, and that we've got a pretty consistent way of doing things. It seems to minimise the amount of headaches that we have with integrating new features and sorting out issues. There's still obviously things that pop up and then fires that we need to put out, things breaking or all that sort of stuff. But I guess it is a lot of work to maintain the project rather than just the code. So now that people are using it, we've got all these new headaches.
Yeah, it's always a balance, right? There's pros and cons to everything.
Yeah.
Speaking of one of those pros and cons, ourselves, Appright, sponsoring you, and hopefully many others, and hopefully we can push more people to sponsor you. What are you finding that will lead to for you? As you said, you can stand up servers and things like that, but will that help you grow or help people come onto the team that you could possibly pay? Is it to that level?
Yeah, certainly. The first and foremost thing that it's allowed us to do is to keep providing like a demo server to for everyone to come and use and try out the product and sort of get a real feel for it, which is really cool. And it's certainly helped justify like the core dev time towards the product. I guess the new exposure to the project, that we can attract people who we might be able to pay to provide consulting services or features to the product that otherwise might not have been there. Like it's been really cool to learn all the different things though. Like this is all, for me at least. There's a few other devs in here now who have a lot more, I guess, web experience and sort of databasing software experience than I do, but it's been a really interesting learning experience to bring all this forward.
Absolutely. Well, I hope you all the success in the world. It's been such a pleasure talking with you, Oliver. I really appreciate it. I think InvenTree is an amazing product, but it's just in its beginning, so I think it's going to take off from here.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for your time as well. It's been lovely to talk to you.